They were the ultimate duo of the Old West, but when the final curtain fell for Jack Elam, Clint Walker was nowhere to be found. No press release, no front row seat, and no final goodbye. While fans whispered about a secret feud, the truth was far more dangerous. A life-or-death choice that Clint's doctors warned would be his last if he dared to show up. This was not a case of fragile Hollywood ego or a bitter rivalry hidden behind the scenes. This was a tragedy forged in blood, medical miracles, and a hidden ticking time bomb inside the chest of the silver screen's most indestructible cowboy. To understand why Cheyenne abandoned his greatest co-star at the grave, we have to peel back the polished veneer of the golden age of Westerns and expose a terrifying reality that Clint Walker kept buried for decades. When Jack Elam passed away in October of 2003, the entertainment world collectively mourned the loss of its favorite cinematic outlaw. With his famously wandering eye, grizzled demeanor, and uncanny ability to oscillate between terrifying villainy and uproarious comic relief, Elam was an absolute institution. The press naturally expected a massive turnout for his memorial, an assembly of the great Western titans who had shared the dust and the glory with him. At the very top of that list was Clint Walker. Standing an imposing 6'6" with a 48-inch chest, Walker was the bedrock of television's Western dominance. Together, they had cemented their legendary status in classics like The Night of the Grizzly, where Walker played the stoic, immovable force of Marshal Jim Cole, while Elam provided the chaotic, mischievous energy of Hank. They were opposites in every conceivable way, yet their chemistry was undeniable. The public assumed they were inseparable brothers in arms. So when the day of Elam's funeral arrived and Walker was entirely absent, the rumor mill immediately ignited. Tabloids and fans alike speculated wildly. Had they suffered a massive falling out? Was there an unspoken jealousy regarding top billing? Did the eccentric, prank-loving Elam finally push the strictly professional Walker too far? The silence from Walker's camp was deafening, and in the absence of an official statement, the narrative of a broken friendship began to solidify in the minds of the public. But the truth of Hollywood is often much stranger, and vastly more profound, than cheap tabloid gossip. The reality was that Clint Walker loved Jack Elam like a brother. Behind the cameras, the dynamic between the towering leading man and the quirky character actor was the stuff of cinematic folklore. Walker, known for his rigorous discipline, health food devotion, and quiet professionalism, was the anchor of any production. He was a man who rarely broke character and took his status as a heroic role model incredibly seriously. Elam, on the other hand, was an absolute force of chaotic good. He was a notorious gambler on set, constantly hustling crew members in games of pitched pennies or nickels, and he possessed an infectious, subversive humor that could break the tension of a grueling 14-hour shoot under the sweltering California sun. One of Walker's fondest memories involved Elam executing an elaborate practical joke where he faked an earth-shattering sneezing fit, only to spray a completely bewildered young stand-in with a mouthful of water. It was this exact levity that Walker desperately needed. Elam grounded the towering giant, reminding him that beneath the heavy burden of stardom, they were just two men playing make-believe in the dirt. Their friendship was intensely private. They did not parade their bond for magazine spreads or leverage their connection for publicity. They shared a quiet, unspoken mutual respect that only two veterans of the studio system could understand. So, to assume Walker simply brushed off the death of his beloved friend is a profound misreading of his character. Walker desperately wanted to be there to see his old friend off into the great unknown. He wanted to sit in the pews, bow his head, and pay his final respects to the man who had brought so much light into his professional life. But his medical team delivered an ultimatum that stopped him dead in his tracks. Attending that funeral would not just be an emotional ordeal, it would be a literal suicide mission. And here is where the story takes a terrifying, unbelievable turn. Because 32 years before Jack Elam's funeral, Clint Walker was actually pronounced legally dead. Yes, you heard that right. The invincible hero of the American West was laid out on a gurney, completely lifeless, while a hospital staff prepared to send him to the morgue. This was not a movie script. It was a freak, catastrophic accident that fundamentally and permanently destroyed the internal architecture of Walker's body. If you do not know the horrific details of May 1971, you cannot possibly understand the agonizing choice Walker was forced to make in 2003. In the spring of 1971, Walker, an avid outdoorsman and fitness fanatic, was skiing the treacherous, steep slopes of Mammoth Mountain in California. While navigating the irregular, twisting terrain at high speed, he lost his footing and was violently thrown from his path. In a one-in-a-million nightmare scenario, as he tumbled uncontrollably down the mountain, The sharp end of one of his own ski poles acted as a spear. It drove directly into his chest, plunging 4 inches deep, piercing straight through his breastbone, and directly penetrating the ventricle of his beating heart. Walker was rushed 45 agonizing miles away to Northern Inyo Hospital in Bishop. By the time he arrived, his heart had stopped. 2 separate doctors examined his massive, broken frame and officially pronounced him dead. His body was waiting to be transferred to the meat wagon. But by what Walker would later call a divine miracle, a third doctor, a heart specialist who was simply walking through the hospital basement to get to his car, noticed the actor's body. Recognizing him and refusing to accept the grim prognosis, this doctor demanded surgical tools right there on the spot, stripped off his coat, and cracked Walker's chest open to manually repair the shredded ventricle. Walker miraculously survived and, incredibly, returned to filming within 2 months. It only cemented his legendary status as an indestructible titan. What the studio publicity machine carefully hid from the public was the devastating long-term cost of that injury. Walker's heart was never the same. It was deeply compromised, heavily scarred, and highly susceptible to extreme fluctuations in blood pressure and emotional distress. He was suffering from the early stages of congestive heart failure. Fast forward to 2003, and Clint Walker is now in his mid-70s. His cardiovascular system is a fragile house of cards. When the news of Jack Elam's passing broke, the grief hit Walker like a freight train. The emotional devastation of losing one of his last true contemporaries was profound. Walker immediately began making preparations to travel and pay his respects. But his cardiologists intervened with brutal honesty. They warned him that the lethal combination of intense emotional grief, the severe physical stress of traveling, and the overwhelming media circus at a high-profile Hollywood funeral would almost certainly trigger a catastrophic cardiac event. His heart, still bearing the brutal scars of a ski pole from 3 decades prior, simply could not handle the spike in cortisol and adrenaline. The doctors laid it out plainly. If you get on a plane to go bury your friend, you will likely be joining him in the ground by the end of the week. This was the agonizing paradox of Clint Walker's life. He had the outward appearance of a literal superhero, a man carved from granite who looked 20 years younger than his actual age, yet he was living with an invisible, ticking time bomb in his chest. Walker was forced to make the most excruciating decision of his adult life. He had to prioritize mere biological survival over his deep moral desire to honor his friend in person. He chose to stay home. He chose to live. But the cost of that survival was enduring the whispers, the rumors, and the unfair judgment of a public that did not understand the silent war raging inside his own body. Instead of risking a fatal heart attack in a crowded funeral parlor, Walker chose a profoundly different, deeply personal way to honor Jack Elam. He retreated into the quiet solitude of his home in Grass Valley, California, and spent the day doing what he believed Elam would have actually wanted, remembering the joy. Walker reflected on the thousands of hours they spent in the dirt and the dust. He remembered how Elam, despite playing some of the most ruthless, terrifying villains in the history of cinema, was actually a gentle, generous soul who hated the pretension of Hollywood. Elam himself was a man who understood medical hardship. Having lost the sight in his left eye during a childhood fight in a Boy Scout meeting, Elam knew exactly what it meant to carry a physical burden and turn it into a cinematic strength. Walker knew, without a shadow of a doubt, that if Elam were sitting across from him, pitching pennies and laughing that raspy, villainous laugh, he would have violently cursed at Walker for even considering risking his own life for a funeral. Old-school cowboys did not demand elaborate public mourning. They valued loyalty, common sense, and the preservation of life. Walker honored Elam not by wearing a black suit for the paparazzi, but by holding onto the memories of a man who made the grueling, punishing work of the silver screen feel like a grand adventure. Clint Walker would go on to live another 15 years, meticulously managing his fragile heart, until he finally passed away from congestive heart failure in 2018 at the age of 90. His absence at Jack Elam's funeral was never a sign of disrespect, a symptom of a hidden feud, or a display of Hollywood ego. It was an act of profound self-preservation, dictated by a terrifying medical reality that began with a freak accident on a snowy mountain. It stands as a powerful reminder that behind the towering legends of the silver screen are flesh and blood mortals making impossible, heartbreaking choices just to survive another day. But Clint Walker's near-death experience on that mountain is not the only time a Hollywood titan stared death in the face and completely changed the trajectory of cinema history. In fact, what happened to John Wayne on the set of his most dangerous film makes Walker's ordeal look like a walk in the park. If you want to know the terrifying truth behind the Duke's darkest hour, you need to hear this next story.